Amy Anger is a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist with a thriving private practice that she has operated for over 16 years. A graduate of the Yale Child Study Center, she works with kids ranging from toddlers to teens and their parents to help support a healthy parent child connection. You can also find Amy on Instagram at The Real Parent, where she takes the information and strategies she uses in her clinical work and makes the information available for all families. Thank you so much, Amy, for talking with me.
Thank you for inviting me, Aniko.
So, my first question is I know so much of your work has to do with connection between the parent and the child. So,
Yes.
how does modern screen technology impact that parent child connection?
Well, it's a tricky question because the way it impacts connection totally depends on the way that families utilize it. It can help and enrich the connection if used properly, but it can also totally get in the way depending on the boundaries that families had set up, how parents and kids all are engaging with screens. Mostly we're talking phones, but we can also be talking iPads, laptops, all of it. Um, so really that is family dependent, and it's often thought of as it gets in the way of family connection because I think that unfortunately that is the thing we are most commonly seeing. But I would love for parents to understand it doesn't have to. And that depends on really setting up solid boundaries from the start, following through on it, modeling good behavior, because there are things, even picture like, your photo memories come up. You can text that photo to a child and be like, oh my word, this just popped up. It made me so happy to think of you, right? You can use it to connect, share a playlist, text them a little note throughout the day, whatever. You can use it to connect, but be intentional about it, because if you're not careful and if you don't have boundaries and awareness around it, it will get in the way of the relationship and you will suddenly find yourselves gravitating to phones more, interacting less in real life. And that's when we see phones become a problem for families.
I love the answer because it's so balanced because um with all of these issues there's almost always pros and cons, and like you
Yes,
said,
always.
it completely depends on how you model, right? Which you covered, like and the boundaries inside of families. So those are such good tips. So my next question is about boredom, which is a huge uh question in our modern world because we
Yes.
are struggling with it, I think, as a society, whether we're children or adults or anybody, really. So, why is it important for kids and teens to be bored or to have downtime?
So it's funny, boredom has really become that dirty word, right? It's like, my child's bored, I need to fix it. And
Yeah.
we as the parents have to realize, no, we don't need to fix boredom. Boredom is an opportunity. Boredom, if left to figure it out themselves, boredom leads to creativity and leads to figuring out, okay, I'm bored, what should I do instead? And creativity is some of the earliest scaffolding for kids to learn problem solving.
Yeah.
And we do not want to rescue them from learning that. We don't want to rescue them from figuring those things out. But often we as parents are approached by our kids, I'm bored, and we immediately rush to fix. And that then becomes the thing that we are rescuing our children from their own process of problem solving. The other important part of boredom is that, like all different feelings, boredom is an emotion, boredom is a feeling, and we want our kids to learn to regulate all the feelings, right? When you're excited, I want you to learn how to be excited in the proper way, in the proper place, and to not go totally overboard, but also don't just be static. Same with negative emotions. And we want our kids to learn to self regulate when they're bored, because without that, you might find, okay, if my child comes to me and says, I'm bored, and they know that I will fix it, when they find themselves in a situation where boredom is not fixable by somebody else in the room, that's when we start to see behavior and acting out or teasing or using inappropriate ways to deal with their boredom. So it's creativity, it is self regulation, and it is all part of a larger process of emotional maturity.
Yeah, those are all such good points. I know one of the things that we teach kids is, when you're bored, you're actually not dormant. It is activating a special, different part of your brain, right? Where creativity and problem
Absolutely.
happen, right? That's where we make sense of the world and put our ideas together. So, like you said, it's a useful emotion, even though it can feel painful. And
Yep.
it is on that pain side of that the feelings balance, right? Like, but I think, like you said, like teaching them this is a good thing and maybe narrating that for younger kids, even, right? Like you're bored. I know it can be hard. I know you can figure it out. However you want to say it, but
Yes.
acknowledging it, I think, is
Absolutely.
key.
You can validate it without
Yeah,
fixing it, right?
yeah,
Validate it, but still put it back on them to be like, huh, it's like, yeah, you are feeling bored right now. I'm so excited to see what you decide to do. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Like, what a fun problem to have.
yeah. I love that. And then the last thing I was thinking about as you were talking about it is um, emotions are temporary, right? They come, they go. And I think that that might be another great message to send kids. Like, I know you're feeling bored, however you want to validate it, like you said, it'll pass,
Yep,
this feeling like every other feeling will come and it'll go. So,
I love that.
yeah, those are really good ways to explain it to kids. Okay, so this next one is, I think, a huge question and probably one of the biggest ones that we get when we do our parent eds. So, when is the right time to introduce a smartphone?
Oh, that is a loaded question.
I
That is a huge question because unfortunately, there's not a one size fits all answer, right? What works for one family might not be the right fit for another family. I do share with parents reasons that I don't think are a good reason to get a smartphone, right? And a child feeling left out, or I'm the last one to get it, or you as the parent just got an upgrade on your phone and you happen to have an old phone lying around. All
Yeah,
of those, in my opinion, are poor reasons to give a child a smartphone because there's not a lot of intentionality behind those decisions. And if you have older kids, if you have kids with smartphones, you are well aware that when your child gets a phone, things change. So you want to make sure that you are introducing this new part of your family and this new aspect of your relationship very carefully. So for our family, we've decided 14 is the age. Like, no matter how ready you seem, no matter how ready you feel, for us, 14 is a minimum. That has helped. We started that with our oldest, and that has been such a gift because the younger kids have fully seen and understand asking isn't going to change that. It's
yeah,
not going to come any sooner with begging. So kids like knowing what to expect, and to give them something that they can rely on really does help some of the anxiety around it. I do suggest a couple of kind of readiness ideas around giving your child a phone. So those would be, how responsible is your child in handling their time and responsibilities that they already have, right? I'm thinking things like homework, extracurricular activities, jobs that are helping out around the house. Are they already managing those things well? Or are they showing you, it's already hard for me to manage my time? Why would I add something else that is hard for me to manage my time? How do they take care of their belongings, right? Phones are not cheap. And kids, I mean, kids are losing things all over the place. Water bottles, sweatshirts, like go into any school lost and found, right there you see kids have a hard time keeping track of their things. If I give my child this phone or this smartwatch or whatever, can I trust that they can take care of it? So that would be the second readiness. And then my third readiness would be, how does your child speak and how are they showing that they can be respectful and kind and careful with their words, even and probably especially when they're upset? And the reason that I feel that's important is if if you've got a child who the emotion comes in and they are immediately reactive and they just like word vomit and are rude or disrespectful or completely disregard the people around them in your house or at the dinner table or wherever that is, why would you give them a microphone to the world,
yeah,
right? Your child is already showing you, hey, I'm not ready to control my words when big feelings come or tricky situations come up. I need some time to mature into that. And if you've got a child who shows you, like, hey, I can't control the way I speak to people, I don't kind of read this situation and respond appropriately, to me, that is a child who is not ready for a phone. And you're really setting them up for some tricky social situations, and you're setting them up to do and say things that leave them feeling shame which is not the situation we want to put our children in.
I love all of those suggestions because they're so pragmatic and I think easy for parents. What do you think? Just a quick follow up. What do you think about a phone as a gift, as a concept?
I'm not totally opposed to a phone as a gift, but for me, it would be the sort of thing that is couched in the beginning, that there's certain expectations that this gift is not just completely yours, right? Because if it's like, well, but you gave it to me, this is my present, therefore I get to use it however, whenever I want, would be very problematic. So if you're giving a phone as a gift, because you've decided in your family, hey, here's how we decide we're ready. This child is ready. They've kind of shown us they're ready for this next stage. Um, it's a gift that would come with a lot of strings attached. So I'm not completely opposed to it, but definitely not carte blanche. Hey, here you go, have fun.
Yeah. So it sounds like not until developmentally ready, right? So if you
For
do choose
sure.
to introduce it as a gift, first check for all the things that you mentioned with the developmentally ready, right? So are they responsible? Are they respectful? Are they mature enough to handle this? Because as you said, it's just going to amplify any of the behaviors or
Everything.
issues or things
Yes.
that are going on in real life. One thing I wanted to add, because we hear a lot about this idea of need, right? My kid
Mm-hmm.
needs a phone, right? So in our house, my son's 11. So, and we have the same thing as you. We've said at 13, we will talk about talk and text, right? So you can
Yeah.
also pace it. But for us, for him, what we've said is, look, need will come when you are operating in the world independently without a grown up, right? When you're being dropped off at the mall, when you're, I don't know, maybe off on your own more where there isn't a parent present or something like that. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's, I think, a part of the puzzle too. I think the developmental ready is like the number one, but
Yes.
I think kids think they need it before there's actually like a tangible need, right? Because of social exclusion, which you touched on as well.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But even social exclusion to me isn't a need, right?
Yeah.
Like, technically, if we're looking at it, and I truly believe this, I am an adult, I am a grown woman with a job and a family and all these things. And technically, I don't need a phone. I can
Yeah.
get by without a phone. Like, a phone is frosting. And especially for a kid, a phone is frosting. And when we think back to some of these problem solving days of, oh, you didn't get picked up at school or you didn't end up meeting up with these people or whatever, that is also another opportunity for problem solving, right?
Yeah.
How do I solve this situation? And in some ways, phones are actually crippling our kids in terms of thinking through problem solving, thinking on their own. Like, you've got girls going in to pick a prom dress, for example, and they might be looking in the mirror and, oh, I like this one and I like this one, but I don't want to decide. And so they blast a text to all their friends, help me choose,
Uh-huh.
right? It's great to have that and it's kind of fun. But when we look at what's underneath some of that, there are a lot of ways that we are actually taking away really important coping skills from our kids. So I for sure am not on the bandwagon that kids need a phone.
Yeah.
Like,
No, that make
absolutely not. There's no case that my kids could make for me that they need a phone that I wouldn't be able to come up with another solution to, like, oh, here's how you would solve that problem. And some of it is just simple planning ahead, right? We are making it so our kids don't have to plan ahead very much anymore because everything's instant with a phone.
for sure. And I think we're both talking about smartphone, but I think we can classify like limited to talk and text a little bit differently, right? Like that could be a little bit more of a need. I think a smartphone, I agree with you, is always a want. Like
Yeah.
you could get by your entire life, even as an adult, as you said, and be okay without it. So do you agree like that there could be a phase
Somewhat.
there? Okay.
Somewhat, because I even, if you've got a kid young enough that you're feeling like, they need to be able to contact me, that to me says that child's young enough that you're always going to know where they are and what the plan is for pickup or whatever. So even that, I mean, my own kids have tried that on me. Like, okay, I know I don't get a phone yet, but what about just a watch or whatever? For
Yeah.
me, I haven't seen a situation in my own family enough that shows me, oh, this is actually a need. But
Yeah.
that is also not factoring in for two-parent working families, both
Mhm.
parents working outside of the home, or single parent families. So I absolutely do think that there's room within that to say, yes, like immediate contact, emergency contact, being able to have access like that, certainly that will fit for some families. But I think sometimes we're getting very broad in our definition of need and not always really being truthful to what's at the heart of it.
Yeah,
So
I completely agree with you. And in my family, it's the same thing. My son's tried that. Well, it's just an Apple Watch thing on me, which to me, an Apple Watch is just a little bit more of a limited version of a phone. But at the same time, I'm married, I have support. I can reach him, through his teachers, right? I have access there.
sure,
I'm not, I can't imagine, maybe being divorced and not having a great relationship with my ex and having to go through my ex to reach my kid. Like in those situations, I
sure,
can see why people make different decisions. And we actually have a term for this. We call it digital privilege or dopamine, because it's this idea that you said it earlier, the one size fits all. Like what works for me and my family might not work for you in your family. And
absolutely.
limiting and introducing tech slower is actually a privilege, because it does allow for all those developmental benefits that you described, but it's also in general considered a little bit healthier, right, on the developing mind. So it's such a complicated and individual issue, but thanks for breaking that down for me, because I do think a lot of families think, oh, talk and text is it's so benign, it's so minimal, but I'm personally on the same page as you, where I do think it's something that you don't need until much, much, much later, as
Yeah.
a teen, really.
And I think
So
when we're introducing it really young and as a necessity, we're creating this dependence on it for our kids, right? Like, oh, I don't know what to do right now. I need to ask mom, or I need to ask my friends, where it's like, no, actually, I trust you. I trust you to figure out and make a good decision. And I know that you'll be able to figure that out on your own. So really it's full of nuance, but intention is at the heart of it. Intention within each family, whatever your family situation looks like, being very thoughtful and intentional about how and when you introduce a phone is something you'll never regret doing, because it's kind of, once you've done it, it's so hard to walk it back. Although I do, if parents are like, hey, we've done this and we've realized the boundaries are too wide, they're not handling it, I am absolutely a fan of walking back and saying, hey, we've made some mistakes, we need to course correct here. But it is so much easier if you are very intentional about the decision from the beginning, and it's not just, oh my word, really, everybody else in your class got one, oh, your best friend just got one, or whatever. Deciding what works for our family.
yeah, it's like you said, it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle, right?
It
It's
is, it
it's
really
doable.
is.
It makes it a lot harder. So let's talk about social exclusion a little bit more. We touched on it a little bit. So how can parents manage the social exclusion that comes from differences in the pace of tech introduction? You've mentioned a couple examples just now, like my best friend has it, everybody in fourth grade has it, whatever your kid is
Sure,
saying, or the choices regarding what media they allow in their families. So how can parents manage this? Because it is, again, one of those things that can feel incredibly painful for the child that's
sure.
experiencing it.
So on a very practical level, because again, if we're saying in our house 14 is our age, I only have two kids over 14 and I have four kids under 14. And I don't want them to be left out, but there certainly are some things I'm thrilled for them to be left out of,
Yeah.
that happen with kids and phones. But I essentially treat my own cell phone as like our family phone. So if my son comes to me and says, well, they're all on a group text to coordinate like playing basketball on the weekends or going and doing flag football, then fantastic. You do have a phone number. Your phone number is my phone number. And then I let my kids use my phone to text their friends or to Marco Polo with friends, to have these little points of connection. So I think sometimes we're misguided as parents if we think, well, in order for my child to be connected, they need to have their own phone. It's just kind of rethinking, like, mom, dad, your phone is the new family landline. So it's not an all or nothing. If my child doesn't have a phone, they're disconnected. I think that there are ways within that to say, no, use my number. But I can also say that because I've had this bird's eye view as the family landline, I have had texts from sixth graders time stamped 2 in the morning. I have seen exchanges in group chats that are back and forth and rapid fire texting that are so unbelievably unkind or crass in a way that I know parents wouldn't be okay with. But it's because it's like a too much too soon, right? You just gave your
Yeah.
child this massive way to just say whatever comes to their mind, hidden behind their own house, that they would never say to somebody's face. And I have seen it. And that for me has only confirmed my own decision to wait. But then the other thing, when we're talking, whether we're talking when to give a phone and being excluded or what you have access to on a phone, it is such a great opportunity for parents to model and teach their kids about boundaries
Hmm.
and saying things like, oh, I know that sounds so fun to you. I know you wish that we allowed that too, but each family does what works for them.
Hmm.
Or in our family, I am a big fan of leading in with things that help create that family culture and help validate that family culture of like, oh, that's so great. That works for them. That doesn't work for us. We've decided it's this. And that is just modeling healthy boundaries for your child that when you get into the older grades, when you go off to college, it's okay to see somebody doing something that looks really exciting or really dangerous, but to also realize that works for them. That doesn't work for me. And we can model that from the youngest age. And what parents do and don't allow, whether it's movies or social media or games or whatever, is such a perfect opportunity to just start letting your child hear that message. Everybody does different things. Everybody has to do what works for them. This is what we've decided works in our family.
I love that. We do in our family all the time. And I don't know what you feel about this, but I'll even do it in front of my kids' friends if they're over and they ask, why doesn't my daughter's 7? A lot of her friends have watches already. Ask your mom for a phone, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'll be right there and I'll say, well, in our family, watches are for teenagers. So it's not saying
Absolutely.
like your family's wrong that you made this decision early, but like this is how we do it and that's okay. And I think it's really helpful for the kids on both sides, the kids that's being excluded, but also the kids that are included to understand that this is a family choice and different families have different ideas. I mean, that's just such an easy thing to message because different families have different ideas about everything. Diet,
Absolutely.
I don't know, extracurricular activities, like you name it. It's
100%.
so we use that a lot. And then the other thing that stood out when you were talking and describing what you were seeing on your sixth graders group text, screen etiquette. It is something that is, I think, not taught enough. And I don't blame
Absolutely.
the parents. This is why in our work, we're really trying to kind of get in on the school level. But kids that young, they don't even have basic screen etiquette to address like the frequency of their communication, obviously the respectfulness of the communication, time boundaries. Like nobody wants to receive a text at 2 in the morning, right? And
Yes.
we just kind of expect if we hand it to them, they'll know what to do, but they need so much education. And I would even argue that a lot of grown-ups have trouble with their screen etiquette, right?
Oh,
Pulling out the phone
absolutely.
in the middle of dinner or whatever it is, right? So this is just a huge, I think, societal issue that we're still grappling with. I mean, it is still brand new. The iPhone came out in 2007, which is nothing in the course
Yeah.
of our
Still
modern.
a baby.
But like, lastly, I loved your term family landline. I have never heard that. And I think that really can take the pressure off for some of those parents that are feeling so badly for their children being maybe the last one left out of their group or something like that. I think it's a good little dipping your toes in, and but it also allows you as the parent to kind of see what's going on. And I think if more
Yeah.
families did that, they might delay it even further just based on what you're saying about what you see and how much you have to manage as a parent,
Yeah.
overseeing all that, managing all the little issues that come up. I mean, I'll be honest, that's one of the reasons I have many others that I pace tech introduction slowly. I do not want to oversee all of this.
Oh
It's
my
too
word.
much.
It is my least favorite part of parenting. I am
Yeah.
not exaggerating. I'm not everybody's like, be careful of teenagers. Your kids become teenagers and they're like sullen slamming doors. No, my teenagers are delightful. I love being around them, but setting the safeguards in place, managing the apps, doing the time management, doing phone checks, which I am also a fan of. It's not just a give a child a phone and you're ready. It's conversations, it's checking, it's staying ahead of the tech because there's always workarounds.
Yeah.
It is my least favorite part of parenting, but it is one of the most critical because the without it, the boundaries just become too big too soon. And you can go from some of the worst case scenarios where you've seen real tragedies come from kids who got themselves into really unfortunate situations on a phone, down to the very light, like, hey, that's not the kind of language that we use in our family. Please make sure that even when you're typing a message, it's appropriate to what we feel is right in our family, and everything in between. And as parents, you can't step away from it. It is a part-time job.
Yeah.
So
And it's
pacing it benefits the kids, and you will be glad, because once you're starting to do it, it's a lot to manage. And for a lot of families, it brings up a lot more opportunities for conflict, because it's, hey, get off your phone. No, I'm not. Well, wait,
yeah.
it's there. It is a presence in your home. So I've never heard a family that wishes that they had given it sooner, but I've heard
Yeah.
plenty of families who have regretted giving it as early as they did.
Yeah, that's so true. And not to mention, I mean, I'm in the tech industry basically, and it's hard enough for me to keep up with all this stuff. It's like whack-a-mole. Imagine
Yes,
your everyday parent that is maybe not tech savvy having to oversee the stuff. It's kind of an impossible task. So
it is, which I think is why a lot of parents end up kind of just going, fine, like I'm sure they're fine on it, right? Because it's that overwhelmed that suddenly you just go, I don't even know where to start. I just won't start anywhere.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we touched on this very little bit earlier, but I would love to hear your thoughts about when we have differences in tech philosophy, right? So in a two-parent household, so whether the parents are together or divorced, like how does that work in interfamily relationships? If like, I don't know, maybe one parent is super free and easy with tech and the other one wants to pace it, like how does that work?
Super tricky. And I think we're probably looking at maybe two different answers to that. If we're looking at a two-parent family under two separate roofs, then that, much like mediating through a separation or a divorce, that is going to have to be the sort of thing that comes to compromise, and also the sort of thing that at a certain point you have to realize, when they're not in my home, I can't enforce those rules. I can
Yeah,
try to instill in them, hey, this is like a healthy amount of time, or these are the games that you feel good after you've played, versus after you've spent time doing this, you often end up maybe a little bit irritable or short tempered, and you can hope. But when you are not there to also enforce and engage with it, that's going to be really hard.
yeah,
And I get a lot of messages from parents in that exact situation. Hey, when they're at our house, this is the rule. But then they go, and half the time they're there and it is all undone. It's trickier for a kid. I mean, obviously, best case scenario would be both parents are on board in each home of certain rules. Like maybe there are just at least minimums that we say, okay, no phone in the room overnight. Can we at least agree to that?
yeah,
Maybe you come to terms with certain agreements. When it is two parents in the same home who have very different styles, that I think requires and is important to have some tough discussions, because ambiguity with kids under the same roof with, hey, it's implemented this way or it's carried out this way with different parents, that's going to be really hard. And your kids are going to play into that. And again, it's going to become more opportunity for conflict. So I would say it's going to require some give on the part of both parents. But if you don't at least come to some level of agreement about maybe even three or four baseline rules to say, can we at least agree to this? I would say top again, phones in the room overnight, phones at the table, which apps are allowed and which are not allowed. I would say those would be some of the biggies to say compromise on both sides, because you as the parents are going to be better off when you present this united front to your child of like, okay, hey, here are the screen rules and we're both going to follow through on these. Otherwise, again, it sets your family up to be in conflict, which completely negates the whole reason, not the whole reason, but a lot of times we're giving our kids phones to feel connected. But if giving them the phone to feel connected then leads to conflict and disconnection in your own home, that is a complete loss. And you should sacrifice the phone over sacrificing the connection, but finding a way to come to some sort of agreement, because ambiguity will kill it and will just present opportunities for conflict and irritation ongoing, instead of at least saying, Can we at least agree to this?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good suggestion because, I mean, even if there is animosity, let's say in a divorce situation or something like that, I mean, I think agreeing to just some very basic, minimal guardrails
Yes.
seems doable by pretty much anyone, right? Especially if they're, I don't know, maybe supported by research or something, right? Where there's
Yes.
the phones in the rooms overnight. I mean, that's like a perfect example. There's endless research that supports that this is not a good idea, when it comes to sleep, when it comes to distraction, everything else, right? So I think that's good, like just kind of maybe bite-sized pieces or little manageable parts, right? Instead of trying to
Yes.
tackle the whole thing. Okay, so I want to pivot just a tiny bit and talk a little bit about social media because I know you work so much with teens and you have teens yourselves. And specifically, I want to zero in on body image, which is such a difficult subject. But I know
Such a
that
hot
early in
topic.
your career, you worked in this field. You were a psych tech in a residential center for eating disorders. So, how does social media affect body image issues with teen girls? We know that there's research about this, but maybe you could speak to that a little bit more.
I think, I graduated from high school in 1997. And in 1997, what we saw in terms of models and what was held up as the ideal was what you got from like 17 magazine at checkout at the grocery store or had sent to you, um, ads on TV, actors, all of that. We have now just amped everything up where, with that, it didn't change all that often, right? Like you've got one issue of a magazine, you're going to be seeing those same images until the next issue comes. You're getting exposed to it, but it's not rampant. And at that point, eating disorders and body image were a problem. We have now basically put all of this idea of perfection and what the ideal body looks like and how to get it. We've basically like injected an IV into our children's bodies, and it is just constant stream because it's as fast as you can swipe your finger. Not only are we seeing issues related to body is body image and perfectionism and like body dysmorphia disorder, but even certain outlets that are promoting eating disorder behavior
Yeah.
and teaching eating disordered behavior. So to me, social media, like once you've made the decision, okay, a phone is a big decision. Are we responsible? To me, social media doesn't automatically come with a phone. A
Yeah.
phone starts out with training wheels. It starts out very, very basic with limited stuff. We see how our child does with that. And even when they are doing like the very best with it and handling it responsibly, I would suggest being so careful with allowing social media in because we're only seeing more body dissatisfaction, higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression. Dieting is just the norm, and it really is infiltrating the whole development of our kids, especially teens where they're looking for identity development and they are just being bombarded with these messages about looking good and like what is right, what is not right. We're not giving them a break. And
Mhm.
I can't imagine myself, right? Like any teen girl, kind of, it's the natural struggle. I can't imagine how it would have been for me if I had never gotten a break from it. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I didn't deal with that. But I also want to be very intentional about my own kids and what they are exposed to. And we tend to lean towards girls on this, that body image issues are a girl's issue. And predominantly they are, but our boys are also equally affected, right? Like muscle, working out, bodybuilding, that whole culture around that. It's not gender specific. We need to be careful with both our boys and our girls about what they're exposed to and the methods that they're hearing of how to get there and help them filter out what is truth, what is reality, and and how they can kind of guard against that.
Yeah, it's I mean, I know that there's plenty of research that shows correlation, right, between if you're entering social media with like an existing mental health condition, right? If you're already anxious, if you're already feeling a little bit depressed, I mean, social media's job is to amplify kind of your
Yes.
state of mind, whatever it is. So I know there's correlative research in that area, but I mean, just based on my conversations with other experts and things that I've seen, it just seems like body image is the one very clear, cut and dry connection where we're able to connect those dots, not only with studies, but also with, the Facebook whistleblower. There's been two of them, two Meta whistleblowers that have both come out and, brought this issue up to the forefront. So there's just so much evidence here that these companies aren't protecting our kids in so many
No.
areas, but really specifically with body image. And then the only thing I'll add to that, because I agree with everything you said about the volume of what they're seeing and how it's basically supercharging these issues that were already there. You described we're about the same age of how we grew up, right? It was there, but you could get away from it. You weren't in front of
Yeah,
that
it was there, but it
magazine.
wasn't constant for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. But the only thing I'll add to that is the rabbit hole concept, right? Which is curation AI, which is really, my wheelhouse as a social media marketer. I mean, I know how these systems work. And, as a teen, let's say you just hover over something very benign. Maybe it's a photo of a model posing in a bikini or something. If you hover
Hmm.
over that for just a second, you're going to get more content like that,
Yes.
right? Or let's make it even healthier. Maybe it's a workout video, right? So now you're going to get more content like that. Now you're going to get more extreme content like that. Very soon you're going to be getting thinspo, and kind of like, here's how you can
Yeah.
achieve these unrealistic standards. And it's like a rabbit hole concept. So that's in addition to the volume, it's also giving you worse content. I mean, there's no better way of putting it.
Yeah, it's
The
going to
further you
filter
go.
it for that. It's like, oh, you like this more? You stay on here longer for this?
Yes,
Such a good
exactly.
point.
Yeah. So that I think most people don't think about or understand, but these algorithms are so good at what they do.
Oh, they're figuring
Um,
you out in a second, in a
yep.
nanosecond, right?
Yeah. And as a teen, you're already going in with maybe I don't feel so good about my body, and it's going to figure it out real fast.
Yeah.
Um,
And the unfortunate part too, so you've got the teens who already are maybe feeling a little bit insecure, but then you've also got kids coming in who have never even given their body a second thought or body image issues who suddenly are like, "Oh, I didn't know I needed to be thinking about this." Your once unself-conscious child who is suddenly so self-conscious. Like we're giving it to them on a silver platter with
yeah.
social media.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, I could talk to you for hours about all these issues, but you've given such great pragmatic tips, and just being on the ground like you are is so valuable. Dealing with families, and obviously as a mom too. So I so appreciate your time, your insight, everything you're doing every day to also help families through your account and everything else through your Instagram. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me to come on. I've loved our conversation.
Thanks.